Lord Farquaad, having a self-centered concern for ourselves without due regard for the needs of others. You know, as long as we don't have to give up anything or go through any pain, we are willing to let others sacrifice for our benefit. Did you catch that? It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, and he's not giving up anything. He's not giving up his life. He's not going to be in any kind of pain. Everybody else will give up something for his benefit. We are all, Lord Farquaad, people with small hearts and an obsession with self-preservation. I mean, we live self-centered lives. We weaken our relationships when we do. I know I am Lord Farquaad. I like the best piece of chicken. I like the biggest piece of pizza. I live for myself, and my wife and my kids sometimes remind me of that. I don't know about your home, but again, that's sometimes in my home. I can be Lord Farquaad, self-centered, and as long as you're giving up something for me, I feel pretty noble. Now again, that's my house. I'm quite sure your house is way different than my house. I'm quite sure that you are the most selfless individual in your home. Amen? Yeah, right. To one degree or another, we all try to protect ourselves without thinking about others. We all practice self-preservation. We typically practice self-preservation and selfishness because we are afraid of losing something. We are trying to hide something, or we're trying to prove something. You see, from the time we were born, we have practiced self-preservation and selfishness. When Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, one of the sins they passed down to every human being is the sin of selfishness. Now, I want to be clear about something. When I say selfishness, I want to be clear about what I'm not saying and what I am saying. Now, when I say selfishness, I am not talking about self-care. I am not talking about taking care of our bodies and our minds and our emotions. That's not what I'm talking about. Taking care of ourselves is a part of our stewardship. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. What you would do for yourself, you do for your neighbor. So please hear me when I say selfishness, I am not talking about not practicing self-care. I am not talking about burning yourself out at the expense of giving your life away for others. That's not what I'm talking about. We get one body, and we are called to steward that body. We get one mind, and we're called to steward that mind. We are called to steward our emotions. We should have boundaries where we don't become doormats for another selfish person. So hear me when I say selfishness, I am not talking about letting yourself go at the expense of someone else. So when we talk about selfishness, what then do we mean? Here is a simple definition of selfishness. Selfishness, here it is a self-centered concern for one's self without due regard for the needs of others. Let me say that again. Selfishness is the self self-centered concern for oneself without due regard for the needs of others. It is making breakfast for yourself without asking anyone else in the house if they wanted breakfast. It is going to the store to get your favorite snack without asking someone else, can I bring you something back? It is the employer who says, I am going to rake in as much money as I possibly can without due regard for the benefits of employees in the company. It is a teacher collecting a check without giving herself or giving himself giving the students the best possible education. It is a self-centered concern for oneself without due regard for the needs of others. It's a husband taking care of himself without thinking about his wife. It's a wife taking care of herself without thinking about her husband. It is parents thinking about themselves before they think about their children. It's children thinking about themselves before and not thinking about their parents. It is a self-centered concern for oneself without the due regard for the needs of others. It is placing ourselves at the center of the universe and stepping on others and misusing others and mistreating others as we place our needs above theirs. Well, Marvin, listen. Everybody is selfish. And it's a dog-eat-dog world. And if I don't eat first, then I get eaten by the other dogs. If I don't elbow my way to the top and elbow my way to the front of the line, will there be anything left for me? If I don't practice self-preservation, then who's going to preserve me? So I have to be selfish. I have to have a self-centered concern for myself and not worry about other people. The truth is, we have been discipled into selfishness. We have been discipled into selfishness by our culture. You notice in the Shrek video that when Lord Farquaad says, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, which he's not sacrificing anything. He's giving up his men for his own benefit. And notice, everybody applauded. And there's a lesson there, is that we have turned a vice into a virtue. We have actually said that being selfish is a virtue these days. It is okay. It is all right. It is a part of what it means to live in our culture. And nobody is going to fault you for being selfish because this is just our culture. My friends, we have been discipled into selfishness. And we have to ask the question, what then is the root of selfishness? And how, in fact, have we been discipled into selfishness? Here's one of the first points. One of the first points is this, that selfishness at its root is the dethronement of God. Selfishness at its root is the dethronement of God. And I want you to listen to this passage. This is Romans chapter 1. Paul is talking to the Romans about how they have decided not to acknowledge God. They have decided not to retain God in their minds, in their souls, in their lives. And there are residual effects, there are consequences to dethroning God. There are consequences to not let God be God, and when you switch the places and the creature is now at the center of the universe rather than God. Listen to what the text says. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not be done, including selfishness. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness and evil and covetousness and malice. They were full of envy and murder and strife and deceit and maliciousness. All of these are results of selfishness. They are gossips and slanderers and haters of God, insolent and haughty and boastful and inventors of evil, disobedient to their parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Though they know God's righteous decrees that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but they give approval to those who practice them. You see, when God ceases to be the center of our frame of reference, we become the center of our frame of reference, and we become selfish. Not only become selfish, but we practice selfishness. When God is no longer the center of our frame of reference, then we will always make up our own standards that benefit not other people, but benefit us. We will always make up standards that benefits us. When God is enthroned and he is the standard of our living, then we will follow his example by putting others first. We see the greatest act we just celebrated. We saw the greatest act of selflessness when God gave up his son for the sins of humanity. That is the most selfless act we can actually wrap our minds around. When we fail to acknowledge God and retain him in our thinking, we become agents of selfishness in our world, and we contribute to the furtherance of selfishness in our culture. So here's another point. Selfishness is a characteristic of the sinner, person who doesn't know God, and our sinful culture. So check this out. When you and I, as followers of Jesus, decide to not retain God in our minds, and we can become practical atheists. And what I mean by practical atheism is we say that we believe in God, but we act like we don't. Or we say that there is a God, but we act like there is not a God. And so when we fail to retain God in our thinking and in our life and lifestyle, we actually perpetuate the opposite. We perpetuate selfishness in our culture. So listen to these. Here are a couple of verses. It says, for the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded this, that one has died for all, therefore all have died. And check this out. And he, talking about Jesus, died for all. Why did he die for all? That those who live might no longer live for who? Themselves, but for him who for their sake died and was raised. So part of the reason Jesus died, yes, to save us, to restore a relationship with God, but part of the other reason he died is so that we can follow his example, that we no longer live for ourselves. We no longer live selfish lives, but we actually begin to live selfless lives. Here's another passage. This is in Judges chapter 17. This is actually a refrain that comes throughout the book of Judges. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Notice, when there is no king or someone ruling over our lives, in this case, God, Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. I know the days when I have not thought about God. I actually make up my own standards for my life. And I place myself at the center of my frame of reference. And I don't think about Tanya, and I don't think about the kids. And I go and I live for Marvin. And those are the moments where I am reminded, the Holy Spirit reminds me that there is a king over your life, and he is God, and he has a standard. And one of those standards is that you live for other people. Now, I'm not talking about living for other people, that is, letting other people define you, but you live for the needs of others. You think about them before you think about yourself. This is so hard. This is the hard part of discipleship, right? If discipleship was easy, then everyone would do it. That's the reason Jesus says, count the cost. Part of what it means to be a disciple, my friends, it is living like Jesus. This is the hard part of discipleship, is living not for yourself, but for other people. Here's another passage. But understand this, that in the last days there will come times of difficulty. For people will be lovers of self. If we are not in that day now, I don't know what. Lovers of themselves, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy. So part of the root of selfishness, it actually begins with dethroning God. That's the reason there are a lot of people in our culture, they don't want to, it's not that there's no evidence for God. They choose not to believe in God. Why? Because then I can actually make me the center of the universe, and you cater to me, as opposed to me giving up my life for others. My friend, this is the kryptonite of relationships. This, my friend, it weakens our marriages, it weakens our friendships, it weakens our employer-employee relationships, it weakens our friendships with other people, it weakens our relationships in community, it weakens our relationship with other people around the world, and it weakens our homes. It weakens our ministry, it weakens our small groups, because we focus on us. You see, our sinful culture has tapped into our sinful nature and has discipled us into, among other attitudes and actions, selfishness. We, my friends, have become lovers of ourselves. We are self-centered people. I know I am. Selfishness, in fact, is the kryptonite. And it weakens rather than strengthening our relationships. Even Jesus' disciples, those who walked with him, actually, they were bit by the bug as well. Listen to Mark chapter 12. It says, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask you. And he said to them, I love this about Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? He doesn't chide them. He doesn't rebuke them. He says, what do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, grant us to sit one at your right hand, the other at your left in your glory. That's Mark chapter 10. Now, the interesting thing about this particular passage, to show you how tone deaf they were and how truly selfish they were, Jesus had just finished telling all of his disciples, hey guys, I'm about to die. I'm about to be crucified, and I'm about to suffer, and I'm going to die a horrible death, And where there should have been like, oh, they were saying, hey, can you promote us when you get into your kingdom? Like it wasn't almost as if they weren't even listening. This is the crazy part of selfishness. And I have done this, is that in the midst of hurt, in the midst of pain, I'm thinking about me, right? Like one time, Tanya was telling me about her pain, and she was telling me about one of the struggles she was having with at her job, and she was like baiting me. This was like a setup to say, Marvin, here is your opportunity to win Husband of the Year. And I was selfish, and I started talking about me. And my wife is so great. She didn't call me out. She didn't bust me out. But it was a time later that she reminded me. And I am James and John in this scenario. In the midst of the most trying time, they were insensitive in those moments. Now, again, if this is true of them, it is definitely true of us. We have all had James and John moments. So the question that I have to ask is, in what ways have our culture discipled us? Our culture has produced and discipled us into being at least 4 types of lovers of self. Now, I'm going to put these up here. I'm going to kind of just give a brief description, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to reflect in a moment, right? I'm going to give you an opportunity to say, which one of these am I most tempted to be? Or when selfishness is expressed, when I express selfishness, which one normally shows up in my life and how and why? All right? So here's the first one. The first one is Mr. and Miss Marvelous. Like you can see that it is all about me. Now, another name for this is narcissism. So narcissism shows up is that like right now, the spotlight is shining on me. And the narcissist says, hey, I'm going to take a floodlight, and I'm going to shine it on me wherever I go. When I walk into a room, everybody should focus on me. When I begin to open my mouth, everyone should hang on my every word. Or when I share my problems, in fact, I don't want other people to share their problems because my problems are more important than everybody else's. In fact, I'm not even going to give you an opportunity to share your problems because my problems matter the most. That you and I ought to marvel at their existence. Like drop rose petals as I walk in the room. Get on the loudspeaker and says, dun, 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 dun. He's here. She's here. This is the person that is oozing of self-importance. And it's like when you walk in the room, Febreze, the scent of Febreze is all over because life is all about you. Have you ever thought that? Of course you have. Of course I have. Here's another one, the manipulator. These are the type of people who know exactly what to get, how to get what they want, because they know how to make you hear what you want to hear in order for you to give them what you want. This is insidious. I'm telling you, this stuff goes deep. I know how to cry at the right moment. I know how to say the things you want to hear. I know how to pander to you. Why? Because it's all about me. I know how to give you a gift at Christmas that I know you don't want, but I like, and I know you're going to say you don't like it, so I can swoop in and say, I'll take that off your hands. Because we are master manipulators for our... Does this make sense to anybody? Yeah. Here's a third one, the martyr. The martyr, this person wants to make you think that they're sacrificing for you, but the moment they sacrifice for you and you don't recognize their sacrifice, they become resentful of you and bitter because they sacrificed for you and you did not recognize it. And so they sacrifice not because they love you, they sacrifice so you can notice their sacrifice. Whoa, do we have people like that? Of course not. Here's the last one. This is the control freak. The control freak, again, wants the upper hand. They try to exhibit control literally in anything they do. If something doesn't go in the direction that they want, they will try their best to redirect the situation and have it to flow in the way they desire. So, reflection time. I want you to take about a minute or so. And again, it's time to call it and own it. So out of the 4 types of disciples of selfishness, which one is an expression of your sinful nature? Which do you tend to struggle with the most? And which type of selfishness do you tend to exhibit and why? So take about a minute or so and just write it on your sheet. You can, if you want to hide it, you can hide your paper. But this is about calling it and owning it, right? It's about calling it and owning it. So write down and reflect in this moment, which one tends to show up the most. And if you don't know, if your spouse is here, ask them. They will tell you. If you don't know as a parent, ask your children and they will tell you. If you don't know, ask your friends and they will be glad to tell you. What is it like to be on the other side of me? Ask that question. All right, take a minute or so to answer that or reflect on it. And if you want to talk about it with those who are with you right now, you can do that as well. All right, this is like the first time when we talk about selfishness, I hear laughter over here. It's like when you can laugh at selfishness and in terms of growth and actually having people to help you to grow. This is what this is all about. This is about helping us to grow. And this is the next question. How do we kill the kryptonite in our lives and be discipled by Jesus rather than the world? What is the antidotes to selfishness? There's only a couple. Here's the first one. Follow the example of Jesus. Follow the example of Jesus. Listen to this verse in Philippians. Let each of you look not only on his own interests. So notice what Paul says. It's okay to look on your own interest. but just don't look on your own interest alone. So let each of you look not only on his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Pay attention to other people's needs in your home, in your job, among your friends, your children, your spouse, but also to the interests of others. Have this mind. And the way we do that, it is a mindset shift. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. But here is the key and crux of selflessness, but emptied himself. Empty yourself of your own self-importance. Marvin, empty yourself of your own self-importance and take the role of a servant. Take the role of a slave. That's what Jesus did. Being born in the likeness of men and being found in human form, he humbled himself. Should be nothing in my home, should be nothing among my friends that is too small for me to do. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross. Selflessness is a daily death. It's a daily death to ourselves. We don't like to hear that, but becoming like Jesus is like dying daily. It is, instead of putting yourself first, put your wife first, if you're a husband. Instead of putting yourself first, put your children first. And again, many of you parents, you do that all the time. But do it without begrudging it. If you're a child, sometimes put your parents first. They have given up so much for you. And what would it take just for you to ask, Mom, Dad, is there anything I can do for you? Now, make sure you have 911 on speed dial, because when you ask that question, there's going to be, whoa, what is wrong with you? What is it that you want from me? Seriously, because, man, that is one of the things that parents, man, they love. They want to see their children live selfless lives. So follow Jesus' his example. And then secondly, is simply part of the residual of following Jesus' example is actually love and serve others. So out of our connecting with Jesus, we will find ourselves loving others, and not only that, serving others. Here's the verse. This is John chapter 13, verse 34 and 35. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. Here's another verse. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. Try that this week. Place other people's needs above your own. Now, again, I'm not talking about not caring for yourself, but to say other people are more important than I am, and find creative ways to serve them and watch it strengthen your relationships. I want you to take a look at this little clip, which I think is, it says it all and sums up everything that we've attempted to say today. Check it out. It all